They thought she was just another person in the crowd, until they realized the woman they underestimated was the one everyone had been waiting for. The afternoon sun stretched across the small community park in Brookdale, casting warm light over families, volunteers, and local leaders gathered for a neighborhood service event. At the center of the activity stood Maya Richardson, a 45-year-old Black woman known by many residents for her years of dedication to improving the community around her. She wore a simple blue professional jacket, comfortable shoes, and carried a folder filled with notes from conversations she had shared with local families. Maya was not there to make a speech or stand above anyone else. She was there to listen. She walked between tables, greeted residents by name, and asked questions about the challenges they faced every day. To the people who knew her work, Maya was a trusted community leader. But to someone who had never met her, she looked like anyone else attending the event. That misunderstanding began when Officer Daniel Brooks arrived to oversee the event area. Daniel was a 39-year-old white American police officer, with years of experience managing public gatherings. He believed his responsibility was to maintain order, follow procedures, and make quick decisions when something seemed unusual. As he looked across the park, he noticed Maya standing near an area where volunteers were organizing supplies. He did not know her background. He did not know the years she had spent building relationships across the city. He only saw a situation he believed needed his attention. Daniel approached with a serious expression, expecting a simple conversation. Maya turned toward him calmly, greeting him with respect. She did not recognize the assumptions forming around her, but she understood something important about moments like this. People often decide who someone is before learning their story. Around them, several people continued their work, unaware that a simple interaction was about to reveal a much deeper lesson. Daniel asked questions based on what he thought he understood. Maya answered with patience, explaining that she was part of the community event and had been invited to help coordinate the program. Her voice remained steady. Her expression remained peaceful. She did not try to prove her importance. She did not mention the recognition she had received or the people who respected her leadership. She simply stood there as herself. The difference between them was clear. Daniel saw a person he believed needed to explain why she belonged. Maya saw a person who had not yet discovered the full truth. The people nearby began noticing the conversation. Some became curious. Some exchanged quiet looks. They sensed there was more to the moment than what appeared on the surface. Maya remained composed, holding her folder close as the afternoon breeze moved through the park. She had faced difficult moments before, moments when people saw only a small part of who she was. But she had learned that dignity did not come from forcing others to recognize your value. It came from knowing your value even when others did not. And as Daniel continued believing he understood the situation, he had no idea that the person standing in front of him was about to change the way he viewed authority, respect, and the importance of looking beyond first impressions. Long before that afternoon in Brookdale Park, Maya Richardson had learned that the most important work was often done away from the spotlight. She never measured success by how many people knew her name. She measured it by the lives improved, the conversations started, and the trust built between people who once felt unheard. For more than a decade, Maya had dedicated herself to serving her community. She attended neighborhood meetings, listened to families, worked with local organizations, and helped create programs designed to connect people with resources they needed. Her leadership did not come from a desire to be recognized. It came from a belief that every person deserved to be seen, respected, and valued. To many residents in Brookdale, Maya was more than a community leader. She was someone they could call when they needed guidance, someone who remembered their stories, and someone who always made time to listen. Yet outside of those circles, many people had no idea who she was. Maya understood that reality better than most. She knew that people often judged others based on the smallest details. A first glance, a few seconds of observation, a quick assumption. Throughout her career, she had entered rooms where people underestimated her before hearing her ideas. But instead of allowing those moments to create bitterness, she used them as reminders of why her work mattered. She believed the world changed when people learned to look deeper. On the day of the community event, Maya arrived early. She walked through the park before most guests arrived, checking on volunteers and making sure everything was prepared. The morning air was cool, and the sound of people setting up tables filled the open space. She greeted everyone with the same kindness, whether they were longtime partners or volunteers meeting her for the first time. She carried a small folder with notes, schedules, and ideas gathered from months of conversations. Nothing about her appearance suggested the level of responsibility she carried. That was exactly how Maya preferred it. She believed leadership was not about creating distance between yourself and others. It was about being close enough to understand what people needed. Meanwhile, Officer Daniel Brooks was preparing for the same event from a completely different perspective. His focus was on organization and safety. After years working in public service, Daniel trusted preparation and quick decisions. He believed his ability to read situations helped him do his job effectively. He was respected by many colleagues for his commitment and attention to detail. But like everyone, he had areas where he could grow. Sometimes experience created confidence, and confidence could sometimes make people believe they understood more than they actually did. As Maya continued helping residents around the park, Daniel saw only a small part of her story. He did not see the years of service behind her calm expression. He did not know the relationship she had built or the trust she had earned. He only saw the moment in front of him, and that was where the misunderstanding began. Two people stood in the same place with completely different perspectives. One carried years of unseen dedication. The other carried years of experience that shaped the way he viewed the world. Neither knew that a simple interaction would soon become a lesson about assumptions, dignity, and the importance of discovering the person behind the first impression. Officer Daniel Brooks had spent years believing that good judgment came from experience. Every day he entered situations where he had to observe carefully, make decisions quickly, and keep events organized. His uniform represented responsibility, and he took pride in wearing it. To many people in Brookdale, Daniel was known as a dedicated officer who showed up when the community needed support. He was not someone who woke up wanting to create problems. He believed he was doing the right thing by paying attention to details and protecting the order of public spaces. But experience, while valuable, could also create blind spots. Sometimes people become so confident in what they think they know that they stop searching for what they might be missing. Daniel had spent years learning how to recognize patterns, but he had not yet learned that every person standing in front of him carried a story that could not be seen immediately. On the day of the community event, Daniel arrived with a clear purpose. He walked through the park, observed the volunteers, and checked that everything was running smoothly. Families moved between tables, children played nearby, and community members shared conversations under the afternoon sky. From a distance, everything appeared normal. Then Daniel noticed Maya Richardson near the volunteer area. He saw a woman organizing supplies and speaking with residents, but he did not know the full reason she was there. He did not know that many people in Brookdale trusted her voice. He did not know that local organizations regularly worked with her. He did not know that the person standing quietly in front of him had spent years creating positive change throughout the community. Daniel only saw the immediate situation. That was the first mistake. Maya, however, saw something different. She saw a person approaching with questions and uncertainty. She recognized the possibility that he did not understand the entire picture. Instead of becoming defensive, she responded with patience. Her calmness was not a sign that she lacked confidence. It was a sign that she knew exactly who she was. As Daniel continued asking questions, he remained focused on the information available to him in that moment. His voice was professional, but his assumptions shaped the way he viewed the interaction. He believed he was simply following his responsibility. He did not realize that the way someone is treated in a single moment can reveal much about how they are perceived. Around them, a few volunteers began noticing the conversation. The atmosphere changed slightly. People who knew Maya understood there was more to the situation than what Daniel could see. They watched quietly, waiting to see what would happen next. Maya remained composed, holding her folder and listening carefully. She did not interrupt. She did not try to embarrass Daniel. She allowed the moment to unfold naturally because she understood something important. Truth does not always need to be announced immediately. Sometimes the strongest response is allowing people the opportunity to discover it themselves. Daniel believed he was evaluating the situation in front of him, but in reality, the moment was revealing something about him. It was showing the difference between authority and understanding. And before the day was over, Daniel would learn that the person he thought he understood was someone whose story was far greater than he imagined. The afternoon continued moving around them, but the atmosphere near the volunteer area felt different. People were still walking between tables, conversations continued across the park, and the sound of community activities filled the air. Yet for those standing nearby, the interaction between Maya Richardson and Officer Daniel Brooks had become something worth watching. Maya remained calm, but Daniel still believed he was simply handling a situation that required his attention. He looked at the moment through the lens of his experience, focusing on what he could see rather than what he did not know. Maya understood that this was not the first time someone had made assumptions about her. Throughout her life, she had entered rooms where people noticed her appearance before recognizing her achievements. She had learned that some people needed time before they understood the person standing in front of them. Instead of allowing those moments to define her, she used them as opportunities to show patience and dignity. Daniel continued asking questions, expecting Maya to explain why she was involved with the event. She answered respectfully, providing information without anger or frustration. Her tone remained steady, and her expression showed confidence. She did not raise her voice. She did not attempt to use influence that Daniel did not know she had. She simply stood there as a person asking to be understood. The contrast between them became clearer. Daniel had authority because of his position. Maya carried authority because of the trust she had earned over years of service. Around them, several community members began paying closer attention. Some recognized Maya immediately and exchanged quiet looks. They knew the situation was more complicated than it appeared. They knew the woman standing there was not someone who needed to prove she belonged. She had already spent years proving it through her actions. Daniel noticed the attention from the crowd, but did not fully understand why people were watching. He believed the answers were simple. He believed he had enough information to understand the situation. But every question he asked revealed that there was still a part of the story he had not discovered. Maya looked around the park and saw the faces of people she had worked with for years. She saw families who trusted her, volunteers who respected her, and neighbors who knew the effort behind every project she supported. She knew that the truth would eventually become clear, but she also knew that how people arrived at that truth mattered. A person could be forced to admit they were wrong, or they could be given the chance to understand why they were wrong. Maya always believed the second path created more lasting change. Daniel eventually paused for a moment. Something about Maya's response and the reactions around him made him question whether he had missed something important. The confidence he carried when he first approached began to soften. He was still professional, but a small doubt had appeared. Maybe he did not know the entire story. Maybe the person in front of him was not who he assumed she was. The moment remained quiet, but the meaning behind it grew stronger. Maya had not won the situation by challenging Daniel. She had changed the situation by remaining true to herself. And as the sun moved lower over Brookdale Park, the distance between assumption and understanding slowly began to disappear. The quiet tension in Brookdale Park continued as more people began to understand that the moment unfolding between Maya Richardson and Officer Daniel Brooks was not as simple as it first appeared. The volunteers who knew Maya watched carefully, not because they expected conflict, but because they understood the importance of what was happening. They knew Maya had spent years building trust in the community, and they knew her calm response represented something greater than just one conversation. Daniel, however, was still trying to organize the situation in his mind. He looked at the details he had noticed when he first arrived, but he was beginning to realize that details without context could create an incomplete picture. He had focused on what was visible, but he had not yet considered what was hidden. Maya continued standing with the same patience she had shown from the beginning. She listened carefully whenever Daniel spoke, and she answered each question with respect. Her calm presence created a contrast with the uncertainty surrounding the moment. She was not trying to prove that she was important. She was simply allowing her actions and character to speak for themselves. Around them, the community event continued, but the attention of several people shifted toward the interaction. Some residents recognized Maya and quietly shared stories about the work she had done. They remembered the programs she helped organize, the families she supported, and the countless hours she spent making the neighborhood stronger. To them, Maya was not just another person at an event. She was someone who had earned their trust through years of consistent service. Daniel began noticing those reactions. He saw the respect in people's faces and the confidence they had in Maya. Slowly, he started to question the assumptions he had made earlier. He had entered the conversation believing he already understood the situation, but now he realized he had only seen one small piece of it. Maya noticed the change in his expression but did not point it out. She understood that realization had to come from within. People rarely changed because they were forced to admit they were wrong. They changed when they had the opportunity to see something from a different perspective. The afternoon breeze moved through the park as the energy around them shifted. The moment that had started with uncertainty was becoming a lesson in patience and awareness. Daniel looked again at Maya, not simply as someone involved in a situation, but as a person with a history he had never taken the time to understand. He began to recognize that authority was not always displayed through a badge, a title, or a position. Sometimes it appeared through the quiet confidence of someone who remained respectful even when they were misunderstood. Maya had every opportunity to respond differently. She could have used her influence immediately. She could have demanded recognition. Instead, she chose a path that reflected who she had always been. She chose dignity. As the event continued, Daniel felt something he had not expected when he first approached her. It was not embarrassment or frustration. It was reflection. He began asking himself whether he had been seeing people clearly or simply seeing what he expected to see. And for the first time that day, he understood that the person standing in front of him was teaching him a lesson he would remember long after the crowd had gone home. As the afternoon light began to soften over Brookdale Park, the noise of the community event slowly faded into a calmer rhythm. Volunteers continued organizing tables, families gathered their belongings, and the conversations that filled the park became quieter. But for Maya Richardson and Officer Daniel Brooks, the meaning of the day was still unfolding. The interaction that had started with uncertainty had become a moment of reflection, revealing how quickly people can misunderstand each other when they only see what is on the surface. Maya stepped away from the busy area for a moment and found a quiet place near the edge of the park. She looked across the gathering and watched people connecting with one another. To anyone passing by, she appeared peaceful. But inside she was thinking about how many times moments like this happened in communities across the country. She knew that one conversation could reveal much more than a person's first impression. Maya did not carry anger toward Daniel. She understood that people often act based on what they believe they know. The challenge was not simply correcting one person's assumption. The challenge was creating a world where people became willing to question those assumptions before they caused harm. She remembered the reason she had dedicated so many years to community work. It was not because every day was easy. It was because change often began with small moments when people chose to listen. Meanwhile, Daniel remained near the event area, quietly observing everything around him. The confidence he had when he first arrived had changed into something more thoughtful. He watched Maya speak with residents, and he noticed how naturally people trusted her. There was no performance, no need to prove anything. Her leadership was visible through the relationship she had built. Daniel began understanding that he had been looking for a title or a sign of importance, but Maya's influence came from something deeper. It came from consistency, compassion, and years of showing up for others. The realization stayed with him. He thought about how many times people might have been judged before they had the chance to share their story. He thought about how quickly a person could be misunderstood when others only focused on appearances or assumptions. The sounds of the park continued around him, but his perspective had started to change. Maya eventually returned to the group of volunteers and continued helping as if nothing unusual had happened. That was who she was. She did not need a dramatic moment to prove her value. She had spent years building that value through actions that many people never saw. Daniel watched her for a moment and recognized something important. Strength was not always loud. Sometimes it appeared in patience. Sometimes it appeared in kindness. Sometimes it appeared in the ability to remain respectful when others failed to understand you. As the sun moved lower over Brookdale Park, both of them carried away something different from the experience. Maya carried the reminder that dignity could influence people, even in difficult moments. Daniel carried the beginning of a lesson that would change how he viewed every person he encountered in the future. The day was not remembered because of a disagreement. It was remembered because one person's calm response created the space for another person to learn. The sun was beginning to set over Brookdale Park when the final pieces of the day started falling into place. The community event was nearly finished, but the lesson created during those quiet hours was only beginning to reach the people who witnessed it. For many residents, the moment between Maya Richardson and Officer Daniel Brooks had changed the way they viewed first impressions. They had seen a woman remain calm when others might have reacted differently. They had seen someone choose patience instead of anger and dignity instead of confrontation. But the biggest change was happening inside Daniel himself. After the event began to slow down, Daniel received a message from the community coordinator, confirming the information Maya had shared earlier. As he reviewed the details, everything became clear. Maya Richardson was not simply a volunteer helping at a neighborhood gathering. She was the founder and director of one of Brookdale's most respected community programs, an initiative that had partnered with local organizations and public services for years. Her work had helped connect thousands of residents with support, education, and opportunities. Daniel looked again at the woman he had spoken to earlier and felt the weight of what he had missed. The person he had viewed as someone needing explanation was actually someone many people looked to for guidance. The realization was quiet, but it was powerful. There was no dramatic announcement, no moment designed to embarrass him, just the simple truth arriving after he had already formed his opinion. Daniel thought about the conversation from the beginning. He remembered how Maya answered every question calmly. He remembered how she never tried to use her position to make him feel small. She could have immediately explained who she was, but she chose not to. She allowed the situation to reveal something more important than her title. She revealed her character. Nearby, Maya continued speaking with residents, completely unaware that Daniel was experiencing a personal moment of reflection. She was not waiting for an apology or recognition. She had already moved forward because she understood that the purpose of leadership was not to collect respect. It was to give respect. Daniel approached her again, this time with a different attitude. The confidence from earlier had been replaced with humility. He acknowledged that he had not understood the full situation, and expressed his appreciation for the way she handled the interaction. Maya listened carefully and accepted his words with the same calm expression she had carried all day. She did not focus on making him feel guilty. She focused on the opportunity for growth. She told him that everyone had moments when they could learn something new about the people around them. Daniel realized that her response was exactly what made her a true leader. Her strength was not only in what she had accomplished. It was in the way she treated people when she had every reason to respond differently. As they stood near the park entrance, the meaning of the day became clear. Daniel had arrived believing authority was something carried by a badge and a position. He left understanding that authority could also come from compassion, trust, and the ability to see others clearly. Maya walked away from the conversation knowing that one more person had learned a valuable lesson. And Daniel walked away knowing that the next person he met would deserve to be understood before being judged. The days after the community event brought a quiet change to Brookdale. Nothing dramatic happened overnight. There were no announcements or public celebrations. Instead, the change appeared in small moments, in the way people spoke to one another, in the way they listened before making decisions, and in the way they began to recognize the stories behind the faces they saw every day. For Maya Richardson, life continued as it always had. She returned to her regular schedule, attending meetings, visiting community programs, and checking on the people who depended on the work she helped create. She did not view the experience with Officer Daniel Brooks as a victory over someone else. She saw it as a reminder of why understanding mattered. Maya knew that every person carried experiences others could not see. She believed that real progress happened when people chose curiosity instead of assumptions. Daniel, however, continued thinking about that afternoon long after the event ended. The interaction stayed with him because it challenged something he had always believed about his own judgment. He had always considered himself observant. He trusted his ability to read situations and make decisions. But Maya showed him that observation was only the beginning. True understanding required patience. It required listening. It required recognizing that every person had a story beyond what appeared in front of him. A few weeks later, Daniel attended a community meeting where Maya was speaking about improving communication between residents and local services. This time he entered the room with a different perspective. He did not see her as someone he needed to evaluate. He saw her as a partner working toward the same goal. As Maya spoke, Daniel noticed something that had been clear to everyone who knew her for years. Her influence did not come from a title or a position. It came from the trust she built with people. She remembered names. She listened to concerns. She treated every person with the same respect, regardless of their background or circumstances. After the meeting, Daniel approached Maya and thanked her again for the lesson she had given him. He admitted that the experience changed the way he approached his work. He explained that he wanted to become more thoughtful in the way he interacted with people, because every person deserved the chance to be understood. Maya listened quietly and smiled. She told him that growth was not about never making mistakes. Growth was about having the courage to recognize them and become better afterward. Her words stayed with Daniel because they reflected something he had not considered before. Accountability did not have to be about shame. It could be about learning. It could be about creating a better future. Over time, Daniel began applying that lesson in his daily responsibilities. He took more time to listen, asked more questions, and reminded himself that every interaction involved a real person with a unique story. He did not change because someone forced him to. He changed because one moment of honesty gave him the opportunity to see the world differently. Maya continued serving her community, never seeking recognition for the way she carried herself. She understood that kindness was not a weakness. It was a choice that required strength. And in a world where people were often judged too quickly, she believed the most powerful thing anyone could do was take the time to truly see another person. What began as a misunderstanding became a lesson in respect, compassion, and the kind of change that lasts long after a single moment has passed. Months had passed since the afternoon at Brookdale Park, but the lesson created that day continued to influence everyone who had witnessed it. The community looked different, not because the buildings had changed or because the streets were any different, but because people had started looking at one another with more understanding. Small conversations became more meaningful. Simple moments became reminders that every person carried a story that could not be discovered from a first glance. Maya Richardson continued doing what she had always done. She attended community meetings, supported local programs, and spent her time connecting people who needed help with those who could provide it. She never changed the way she carried herself. She did not become more confident because people finally recognized her. She had always known her own value. The difference was that more people around her now understood it too. For Maya, the experience with Officer Daniel Brooks was not a moment to hold over someone else. It was a reminder that change often begins when one person chooses patience in a difficult moment. She believed that people were capable of growth when they were given the opportunity to learn. Daniel Brooks carried that lesson with him as well. The memory of that day stayed with him, not because of embarrassment, but because it showed him something important about his role. A badge gave him responsibility, but it did not give him the ability to know everything about every person he met. He learned that true service required more than making quick judgments. It required listening, understanding, and recognizing the humanity in front of him. Over time, Daniel became more intentional in his daily interactions. Before making assumptions, he reminded himself that every person had experiences, challenges, and achievements that might not be visible. He started asking better questions and taking more time to understand situations completely. The change was not something people noticed in one dramatic moment. It appeared slowly through countless small choices. One day, Daniel and Maya met again at another community event. The atmosphere was completely different from their first encounter. There was no uncertainty between them. There was mutual respect. They spoke about the future of the community and the importance of building stronger relationships between residents and public servants. Maya appreciated that Daniel was willing to learn. Daniel appreciated that Maya had responded to a difficult moment with grace instead of anger. Their conversation was simple, but its meaning was powerful. Two people who had once stood on opposite sides of a misunderstanding had found common ground through honesty and respect. As the evening arrived, Maya walked away from the gathering while the warm light of the setting sun covered the neighborhood. She moved through the same community she had always served, carrying the same kindness and determination she had shown from the beginning. Daniel watched from a distance and understood the lesson that would remain with him for years. Real strength was not found in controlling others. It was found in how a person treated others when they had every reason to respond differently. The park became quiet as the day came to an end. The voices of the crowd faded, the lights around the community center turned on, and another ordinary evening began. But something important had changed. A person once judged by appearance had reminded others that dignity speaks louder than assumptions. And a person who believed he understood everything discovered that the greatest lessons often come from the people we take the time to truly see.